Hello and welcome to this latest episode of Embedded Finance Unplugged, the podcast series from Andaria that is exploring the world of embedded finance, the disruptive fintech sector on course to reach a multi-billion value over the next decade. I'm your host, Graham Barrett. As part of this series, we've taken a kaleidoscopic view of embedded finance, taking in card issuing, compliance, AML, technology, and Andaria's central role in the transformation of the financial sector. On this episode, we're going to focus on information security with Malcolm Portelli, Chief Information Security Officer at Andaria. Malcolm, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you in the podcast. And yeah, as I said, we've been exploring a lot of aspects of embedded finance across this podcast series. So really keen to hear more about the information security side of things. Maybe we could start just by, if you could just tell the listeners about what you do on a daily basis and what your role entails.
Sure. I basically overlook the entire information security strategy and controls requirements for the organization. So we've got a small team. Day to day is making sure that our systems are secure, making sure that if there's anything that needs to be looked at, it's looked at, any anomalous behavior is looked into. But also on a higher level, I look at the strategy. What should Andaria be looking at from a security perspective over the next 2 to 5 years to make sure that we are doing what we can and we are at the cutting edge, really.
And I imagine that role becomes ever more challenging as technology accelerates. I think you've been at the company, 2.5 years, is it? How has your role changed in that time?
It's changed as the company's changed. So, like you said, I started 2.5 years ago. Company was a lot smaller in terms of technology footprint, but also in terms of people. So although the tasks were similar in nature, they obviously got more challenging, and I had to look at a lot of more different avenues, especially when the company starts increasing in recognition, for example, which means that more people know about you, which means that more people want to attack you. So it has changed, but at quite a fast pace, but not fast enough that we weren't able to adapt and grow our security features and controls.
Now, I guess as well, the big change that's happened within the company is the shift to embedded finance. So it'd be great if you could just explain to the listeners about what specific security concerns there are when working in the embedded finance space.
So embedded finance, it's interesting from a security perspective. When you've got the standard payments model, you are dealing with the end customer. So you have full control of the application, full control of the interactions with those end customers. When you're adding an extra middle layer, as we call it, you're adding extra risks. You need to put into place a lot more controls with regards to how you're going to not only protect your end customer, so the end user of the product, but how you're going to protect the middle layer, so your direct customer. And the more layers or pieces you increase into the whole equation, the more controls you need and the more visibility you need. And one of the things that we like to look at is not just what controls we have in place, but how can we help our clients put the right controls in place.
Because I guess every client is different, aren't they? And every client has different controls. So talk to me a little bit about those controls. What kind of controls are we talking about?
So most of them are, your day-to-day security best practice. So security best practices are just that. They're not solely targeted towards financial institutions. They are there for everyone. So a best practice is something that any company should be looking at and any company should be implementing. Off the top of my head, for example, you've got multi-factor authentication. Although that is mandated by certain financial regulations, it is best practice for any industry and for any company around the world, in my opinion. Not just my opinion, and the information security community's opinion. So that's one thing we look at. But then financial services there are additional controls you need to take into place because you're dealing with people's money. So you don't just need to go for best practices. The idea is to go above and beyond. And because a lot of clients are not in the financial services industry, they may be going towards security best practices, and we will always push them to go towards that, but they may not be aware of the best practices from a financial services perspective, and that's where we come in. The idea is to provide guidance and support to make sure that the clients we are dealing with are putting the best security controls in place to protect themselves, to protect their clients, and to protect us as well. And it all works. It all works together. It's an ecosystem in the end. You know, if they're protecting themselves, they are inherently protecting their client and us. And if we are protecting ourselves, we're doing the same for them and their clients.
Okay, well, take me behind the scenes a little bit then, because when you're integrating an embedded finance solution for a client, how does that actually work? I mean, in terms of, the platforms and the applications, can you give us some insight into that?
On a high level, we will essentially provide a list of requirements and guidelines to our client. Again, to implement those best practices, to be in compliance with certain regulations that we need to be in compliance with, and not just from a financial services perspective. One of the things that I take care of as well over here at Andaria is the data protection. So we need to make sure that we are in adherence to GDPR, the UK Data Protection Act, and we need to make sure that our clients are doing the same. Granted, they probably are already, because it's not just a financial services thing, GDPR or the Data Protection Act, but we need to enforce the idea that it is important to protect your client's personal data. And we want to work with our clients to make sure that they are implementing these requirements. One such requirement, for example, would be secure customer authentication. That's mandated by law for financial services institutions. And in a nutshell, what it is multi-factor authentication and secure communication. So it's stuff you should be doing anyway. It's not mandated by law for everybody, but it is for us, and we want to make sure that our clients are implementing that service for their end user.
You've spoken about multi-factor authentication a couple of times today, and I think it's something that everybody is familiar with. We all have to go through that. Just interested to know, how successful has that been? Have you, once now everybody has implemented that, have we seen a lot fewer security breaches?
Yes, most definitely. There was one not long ago, I think, where an organization was attacked in the same way that an organization had been attacked just a month or two before. The first attack was successful. The second attack was not successful because multi-factor authentication was implemented on the system that was attacked. It is a very effective method of stopping attacks from being successful.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting to hear, because when you go through that authentication, you're used to those emails popping up, aren't you? And or text to your phone. And then suddenly you get one and you think, I haven't tried to authenticate in the last half an hour. And then you suddenly get the same message. So, yeah, it does seem to be very successful. Yeah. Now, a lot of, I guess, what you do is about risk, isn't it? It's about assessing risk and minimizing risk. How does risk assessment actually work, both with clients and your suppliers? So
risk assessment, exactly. You mentioned clients and suppliers. It is threefold, actually, because we need to run risk assessments on our service providers, which we have a process in place to do for all service providers to ensure that they are, again, I mentioned security best practices. Adhering to those security best practices, at least we have a set of minimum requirements that if a supplier does not meet those minimum requirements, we will probably not engage with them unless there are other mitigating factors that allow us to, because they have put other controls in place to ensure that those requirements are either going to be put in place or they have equivalent requirements that maybe they're on par. So that's one thing we take into account. And with clients, the same. We provide a list of requirements. We run a risk assessment on not just the industry they operate in, which is not my area. It's more of an AML and compliance area. But we also run assessments on what how they're implementing controls on their end. So that's something that we do. And the risk assessments obviously need to be run internally as well. So we run risk assessments on all three layers. The service provider, us, so our internal controls, and the client itself.
And is that something that's quite easily done? What kind of timeframes are we talking with that kind of process?
I'll be honest, it all depends on who you're dealing with. So the service providers, for example, we have a standard approach. We've got a standard process internally, which we run every service provider through. It was designed from the beginning, from day one not day one, but the beginning of me starting here. It's something that I wanted to put in place relatively quickly. So we've been doing that for a long period of time. We do it periodically. So we will review service providers periodically too, to make sure that they continue to do that, because there is obviously supply chain risk, which is something that every company should be aware of. And now, as of January anyway, there's going to be new legislation targeting financial services institutions and anybody dealing with financial service institutions in the EU called DORA. So it's coming to the forefront. We've been doing it for a while, but now it's going to be mandated from a third-party risk assessment perspective. So we're looking at how we can evolve our risk assessment process that's already in place.
You mentioned the EU there and different legislation. Is it difficult managing information security across borders as well in different countries?
It is from a regulatory perspective. From a security perspective, it doesn't really matter where you are. The risks are similar. There are heightened risks in certain jurisdictions for obvious reasons. But when you're dealing with the security as a whole, the controls are likely to be the same, regardless of whether the risk is higher or lower. You may prioritize certain controls more than others because the risk is higher in one jurisdiction than it is in the other. But the approach we like to take is a bit of a location agnostic approach, because currently we're operating in certain jurisdictions. At some point we might get a license somewhere else and start operating in there. And as opposed to rejigging everything, it's good to be prepared and have the best controls in place so that you are as prepared as can be for almost any jurisdiction.
And I guess that goes back to your point earlier, doesn't it? As the company grows, there are more eyeballs on the company as well, and potentially more people trying to attack you or trying to interfere with your business. Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to expand upon that, I mean, from a worst case scenario perspective, from your perspective, if you came in one morning, what would be that worst case scenario, and what do you have to do to ensure that day never happens?
Probably, I would say worst case scenario would be 2 with the current threat landscape. So a ransomware attack would be a worst case scenario, but one whereby data is extorted. So you've basically got a data breach and a ransomware attack. They often happen at the same time, because when somebody gains access to your systems, they tend to first steal the data and then encrypt it all, and basically ask you for cash to decrypt and cash for them not to share the data with your competitors. It's an approach that they take, and it's a huge industry. So that would probably be worst case scenario. From a controls perspective, we have a number of controls in place for not just ransomware. Our controls are in place for a number of scenarios, which also includes ransomware. And we look at the controls from 3 aspects. So we'd go from educating our people, which is one of the most important to me personally, because there are a huge percentage of successful attacks are caused by the human element. So you need to make sure that your people are knowledgeable about what these attacks are, how they take place, and how they can become a weapon, if you will, to allow these attacks to happen, and how they can stop themselves from being that weapon, if you understand what I mean. So that's very important. Obviously, having the right processes in place to make sure that people are aware of what to do if they encounter any suspicious activity. And lastly, but not least, technology. We ensure that as much as possible, we're using the latest technology not just from a product development perspective, but from a security perspective. If you're using top technology to develop your products, in my opinion, you should be using top technologies to protect your products and to protect your data and to protect your people. So we're always looking out for what we can do and what we can implement from all three aspects, from the people, process, and technology aspect, to better protect our infrastructure, better protect our data, better protect our clients, and better protect our people.
Sounds like a very robust kind of procedure you've got there. Yeah, absolutely. So just talk to me about the attacks as well. I mean, are there any particular trends that you are seeing at the moment or that you've heard about from other people in your position? I think we're all familiar with phishing emails and things of that nature. Are they still kind of the number one threat, or are there different trends that are emerging?
Phishing is one of the number one threats. Social engineering as a whole. So, like I said, using human beings to basically make your way into somebody's infrastructure, into somebody's data. The emergence of generative AI, for example, has implemented both positive and negative effects from a security perspective. On the negative side, it's enabled people who maybe were not able to create malware before to create malware, or if they were, do it faster, because it enables people to generate code at a faster rate than writing it. It also enables people to write better phishing emails. We've all received those phishing emails in our inboxes telling us that we've won something, or it's time to change the password, or so on and so forth. In the past, it was easier to pick out these phishing emails. Now, generative AI has enabled people to create better crafted emails and better crafted messages to get what they want in the end. But on the positive side, generative AI as well, from a security perspective, and I prefer to look at the positive end of it, it's enabled us to generate technologies that can more efficiently pick out this anomalous behavior. So these phishing emails or anomalies in logs or anything of the sort, and kind of take the grunt work, if you will, away from the human and allow the human to focus on the bigger picture.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's almost like a fight between good and evil, isn't it, in terms of AI and how you can utilize the tool better than the people who are trying to attack the business. Yeah. Let's just finish on Andaria and how you are approaching the market. As we said, the company has evolved quite a lot, even in the short space of time that you've been there. What are you trying to do here? I mean, I've spoken to some of your other colleagues about the kind of offering that you're trying to go to market with. Is that a bespoke offering that you're trying to offer? And from your perspective, how do you assess risk when you're dealing with different sectors? Is it the same uniform approach, or is it slightly nuanced in terms of which sector you're going after?
From how we're approaching the market perspective is we've identified certain sectors that could really benefit from solutions that we're developing. And from my perspective, it's ensuring that those solutions, by and large, offer the same basic functionality, obviously in a secure manner, because that's my main area of concern. But obviously then being able to discuss with the clients on whether they require enhanced functionalities, and that's where the bespoke nature comes in. I think it's there's a requirement to have a bit of both, whereby you have your basic product that offers everything that the clients would need, but then there are the wants, and the wants are something that we look at as well, and we see how we can make the product better. If a client would come to us and want to discuss some enhancements that would really benefit their business, then why not? We'll talk about it. We'll see what's possible. From a risk assessment perspective, we have a unified approach. We don't look at things. We try not to look at things in silos, in the sense that we would conduct a risk assessment on a client based on their security levels, their jurisdiction, their AML requirements, everything within one lens, so that we won't have disagreements on whether we will want to work with a client or not.
Now, let's just finish up the conversation, maybe just from a personal point of view. What do you see as your main challenges and opportunities over the next year or so? You've already spoken about AI. Are there any other challenges and opportunities that you see?
We've actually spoken about both of the main challenges and opportunities. From an AI perspective, I mentioned the challenges, I mentioned the opportunities. They will continue to grow, both from a positive and a negative perspective, and we need to keep an eye on that. Legislation is going to be something that we can use to our advantage, but also we have to keep an eye on, because every 2 years or so there's a new bit of legislation which we need to keep an eye on, make sure that we are in line with, for good reason, both to be in line with legislation but also to ensure that we're protecting our customers. Something else, and it's something that a lot of people are looking into, is quantum computing, for example, is something that is very interesting, very could have major benefits, but could also be very dangerous. So we need to make sure that we're keeping up with all of these emerging technologies, which can both benefit our business, benefit our product offering, but also be a threat. So we have to make sure that we have the correct controls in place.
Well, I'm sure everybody at Andaria and all of your clients as well are very glad that you are on top of all these issues. So, Malcolm Portelli, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
There are plenty more conversations to explore as part of this Embedded Finance podcast series. Please like, follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please do give us a positive rating and review. You can find out more about how Andaria is broadening access to digital financial services for businesses around the globe at andaria.com. But for now, thanks for listening and goodbye.